Is this is what I was showing you all. The difference is in the two output shafts. Hi, this is Ray with Easy Simple Mechanic, and today we're going to get back on that generator engine. We're going to tear into it and see if we can get those crankshafts swapped out and put that back together and see how that works out. So stay tuned. Let's get to the action. So we took this engine apart. I didn't bother you guys with the tear down because, you know, we tore the other one down. So I figured you guys could see that one. But just a couple things to make sure of is one is we've got to pull the valve covers off, and you got to loosen the rockers and take them off of the push rods because you have the little lifters here, and you need to be sure to push those up into their well so they stay there. There's the ones for both sides, both cylinders. That way you can pull the cam off without those hitting on the cam lobes when you're pulling it off. So yeah, so you got to do that. You pull the cam, and then the crank, of course, you take the rod bolts off on the rod caps. You pull those down, and then you got to work the camshaft off. You push these pistons all the way up into their bore so that you can work that crank out of there. So I did that. You know, and the other one, the stuff kind of all fell apart because this rod was busted, so we didn't have to take that one apart. This one here, we pulled the cap bolts off of it and just pulled the crank out. The difference is in the two output shafts. See, this one has a shoulder here from the gear. It comes in, it has this shoulder, has this, and then it's threaded on the outside of the shaft. This one here does not have that shoulder. It's a little bit shorter. The shaft is shorter, and it just has a keyway where this was used with a clutch or a CV belt that was used like on a UTV, ATV type shaft. The other thing that I noticed was differences in the size of the crankshaft. If you can see, this has a lot more meat. I guess when they got newer, they went a lot lighter on the crankshaft. Maybe that was because they were having issues with it, not sure. But other than the size of these balancing weights that they, you know, how big this is, maybe it's just for torque or something else. Maybe this has more RPM, this has more torque. But other than that, they're pretty much the same all the way through. The one thing I did do is I went ahead and I polished all the surfaces here so that when, you know, they mate with a seal, this one here had all the aluminum on it from the rod. So we went ahead and polished that all off. I still got to finish, you know, sanding that. I just used some emery paper to get that aluminum off of it. I still have to give it one pass across the whole thing, and then I might take and polish the crank. What I like to use is I use some rubbing compound, like just for paint or whatever. Use some pretty thick rubbing compound and a rag, and just, you know, move it back and forth and polish the heck out of this so it's really, really shiny and smooth. And then we went ahead and cleaned up where the seal goes over here. Now, when I pulled the crankshaft out, the seal on the back of this cover here, the spring and the seal was kind of stuck to the crankshaft. So when I pulled the cover off, the seal kind of went bad. So I had to knock that out. Now, finding a seal for this was really, really challenging. I guess I couldn't find the exact one because those are rubber coated, designed, I guess, so that the housing on them doesn't rust or what have you. But the only seal that I found that I could use, that's a double walled oil seal. is this one right here. It's a national seal. You guys can look at the number there. It's a national 473233. And it's the same size seal pretty much. It has the double seal, the one on the inside and the one on the outside. It's just a tiny bit, I measured, it's just a tiny bit smaller, so it fits just a little bit snugger on the shaft, but it should work fine. The only concern I would have is in the long run would be that this metal, exposed metal, might rust, you know, and then, you know, with the moisture, if you get moisture inside the engine or what have you, you know, down the road with long time use, you might have some issues with that. Now on the front side, this one I didn't pull it out because I thought I might have the same kind of issues. I'm gonna clean it up. It's still kind of pliable. I checked on that, but I have not been able to find that seal, and I'm concerned if I knock that seal out of there and damage it, getting it out like I did the other one, that I may not be able to find a replacement seal. Since that is on the outside, which is the flywheel side of this, if it ever starts to leak, you just have to pull the flywheel off, you know, this guy off on the front, and you'll be able to get to this seal and replace that without separating the engine from the crankshaft or from the generator. So anyways, that's what I did. I went ahead and cleaned all the gasket off of this. The other thing that you'll notice is on the other engine, this bearing here was a bushing. It was kind of like the bushing inside there, okay? It was just, you know, the aluminum itself, or it had some kind of a bushing in it. This has got a ball bearing on it, which to me is a good thing because the shaft, when it kind of seized, the shaft on this one, the crank that needs to go back in there, was kind of damaged. This is kind of damaged right in here from where it froze against the bushing. I don't know if you can see the scars on it. See those scars? So if it had to go back into a bushing, that may not work out so good. It would probably wear out the bushing pretty quick because this would have some play in it. But since this is going into that bearing, and the bearing lines it all the way up against this back lip, I think we'll be fine. The other thing that I noticed was different is there's some shims that are next to the gear here on the backside, the gear that goes to the camshaft here. And these little spacers here, or shims, are different size. So what I'm gonna do is when I put this back together, I'm gonna put it in there and I'm gonna check the end play between the, I'll move the crankshaft one direction and then I'll push it the other way and see what the play is on it. The one that gives me the least amount of play is gonna be the one I'm gonna leave in there. If I put it in there and there's no play, then I'm gonna put the smaller one in there. So the first one I'm gonna put in is the big one. If there is no play, then I'll change it to the thinner one. Just because I figure you gotta have some play in there. Otherwise this will bind up against the face on here. So we need to make sure that spins freely. Those are basically the differences. So right now I'm just finishing polishing. I'm gonna go ahead and finish polishing this guy, and I'm gonna see if I can get some gasket material. If I can get some kind of gasket material that's thin, like the one that was on it, I'm gonna try and do that and make a gasket for it, and that way we can take it apart if we have to get this shim right. And that's about it. totally forgot about this oil pump gear. It won't go in there unless this little notch in this gear, in this oil pump gear, is in the notch for the crankshaft. See how that has a notch? Well, that has to go on that notch, and since it slid down, it wasn't lined up correctly on the shaft when I tried to put it in. So it won't go in that way unless you take this apart, but this will make it a lot easier. This just has an O-ring right here, so we should be able to just put that back in. So let's go back to putting that crankshaft in now. It should go in with no issues. Okay, that's much better now that thing went in there like that. Now we can go ahead and put that pump back in there. We can put these rods back down there. We can put those rods back on, but before, I'm going to go ahead and put this gear back on here for the oil pump now that it's lined up, so we can make it easier to turn. There we are. That went in pretty easy there. We're going to put this front cover. I know you guys can't see this side, but I'm just putting that cover that I took off back on this side. I just put the gear back on it, and now I'm just putting the cover back on it with the seal on it. So we should be good to go there, and we'll have this thing back on there. We'll put this on up there. This make sure that you put the chamfered edge on these rod caps to the outside of where the rods are, so they go against, there's a chamfer on the crank, so they got to go out that way in case you get them mixed up on which ones you took off where. So we'll see here what the torque specs are, and this I found on the web for these engines, and it talks about, it's just a torque chart that has the torque specs, and so we'll see the connecting rod caps got to be between 16.3 and 19.8 foot-pounds. Okay, if you guys can't get your big torque wrench in there, you can also use an inch-pound torque wrench. And so I'm going to start with 16 foot-pounds, which winds up being 192 inch-pounds. And we'll go ahead and torque that, and then we'll run it up. Okay, so that's that, and then we'll just turn these up to 210, which is the max that this will go to. 210, actually it'll go more. What do we need? 210, 222. So we'll go to 220, which is, yep, that's max. So we'll go to the max on this. And that works. this will turn easily with no issues. I want to make sure I got a little in play here. I do. There should be play back and forth this way, but there shouldn't be any play up and down. Okay, that looks all pretty good right there. So now, so that I can move this engine around, I'm going to go ahead and put that magneto back on the other side, and then we'll proceed with putting the camshaft in here, and then we'll put the cover on. The next thing we need to do here is this cam, and we just need to get this cam back in there so we can wrap this up. Before you put the cover on, you want to make sure that you don't, on this kind, because it has the bearing on the cover, you don't necessarily have to lube this surface right here, because that's just going to sit in there. It's not going to spin in it. The bearing's the one that does the spinning. But you do want to put some lube on this little bushing that we talked about earlier, the spacer that goes in there. I'm going to put that one in because this engine had it. The one that was in the other engine was a little thinner. So since this has a roller bearing, the other one had a bushing, I'm going to go with the one that it had for this bearing here. Also, you want to make sure that the surfaces are clean on both sides, on the case and on the cover. And we put a little bit of lube where the oil seal is going to be, and we lubricate the oil seal. There's 2 guide pins on here. You want to make sure those are in place before you put this on. You also may want to put a little bit of lube on this little ball that's on the end of your governor. Yeah. Now the gear on that governor is going to have to line up with this gear here, so we don't know where that's going to be, and it doesn't really matter as long as it gets into the gear. So when it first goes on, we might have to turn it a little bit to get that gear to go on. Okay. Yeah, see, that'll take a little pressure off of the cam, because the cam is hanging there, and if it's hanging, it's not going to let it slide into its slot. But if you tip it up, it takes a little pressure off of that, just enough for it to be able to get in there. Now we can just put these on and we'll torque them down. We wanted to make sure there was some thrust play, just a little bit, not much at all, but we didn't want it to be bound up. First of all, we can rotate this shaft. It rotates real easy. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2 is, what you want to do is you want to hit this rubber mallet, make sure it's seated against the bushing on the opposite side, and then if you smack it on the other side, it should move just ever so slightly. And if it moves, which I saw it move there just a little bit, yeah, there's some movement in there, I mean, then we're good. Because if I put that other bushing on it that was on the other engine, it is smaller or thinner, then it's going to give it more play. So I would rather put that bushing that came with this engine on this shaft. The difference is probably due to the fact that this has that roller bearing, ball bearing on the end, whereas the other one had a bushing on it. To set the valve lash, you gotta adjust the bottom bolt until I got three out right here. I've got the 8, the 10, and the 12 here. 8, 10, and 12. Now, since the intake needs to be 10, what I do is I put the 10 in there and I turn this bottom bolt to where the 10 fits in there really snug, okay? As you could tell, there's some drag there, not enough. We'll turn it, still not enough. Okay, now I feel just enough drag there, okay? So what we want to do is take 2 wrenches, one to hold the bottom one in place, and then the other one to lock the nut on top, okay? Okay, now you can tell that's really snug, but if you want to make sure that you didn't go too far, then take the 8, since that was supposed to be 10, and the 8 should slide in there really easy. If the 8 does not slide in there, which in this case does not, then you've over tightened it. So just back it off a little bit. The 8 should fly in there. It should just be looser than heck, okay? The 10 should go in there with some like that, okay? So you got some resistance on the 10, and the 8 just goes in like nothing, okay? There's the valves, all adjusted. I did find a service manual online for this engine, and it called for 7 thousandths, not 10 cold. It called for 7 thousandths on both cold. So I went ahead and readjusted them a little tighter, and seems to be pretty good now. The other thing I did is I went ahead and I installed the flywheel. And so if you have the flywheel on and you want to adjust the valves, all you have to do is bring this magnet to where it just passes the coil on this one, and you'll be able to adjust the valves on this cylinder on this side. If you bring it around and you bring this coil just to where it passes here on this coil, then you can adjust the valves on that side, because it'll be top dead center. Now the firing on this is a little bit advanced, so when this magnet first comes through here, as it leaves the magnet, that's when it fires. So that's how you can tell it's top dead center and on compression stroke. Well, folks, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Please like and most certainly share, subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next one when we go ahead and see if this engine works, and we get it back onto that generator and see how this all turns out. Thanks for watching.